Okay, happy Earth Day, everybody. Did everybody know it's Earth Day? Or is this the first time you're hearing it's Earth Day? I'm a little bit of an eco nut, so I've been looking forward to Earth Day for weeks now. This is kind of like my holiday. I spend my time sitting around imagining myself living in my little sustainable tiny home and growing my own food and using my dry composting toilet someday. In the meantime, I do everything I can while I'm living here to try to switch to more sustainable alternatives and live a more sustainable lifestyle. So I wanted to share with you a few of my favorite sustainability tips. It's my little sustainability checklist. So first off, let's start with some recycling tips. And hopefully you guys know generally when it comes to sustainability, recycle when you can, reduce your energy uses, try not to drive, eat a vegetarian diet as much as you can. But for now, let's just focus on recycling because it's kind of tricky. So first off, the credit card rule means that if you're recycling something smaller than a credit card, it's too small and can't be recycled. Second, you should rinse out your recycling and not throw away any food. And a subcategory of that is things like pizza boxes. Cut off the greasy part, recycle the cardboard, and compost the greasy part. And make sure you know your city's recycling rules. Some cities recycle glass, some only recycle certain types of plastic, so you have to look up your specific city's rules. And of course, recycling isn't actually enough because 91% of plastics don't actually get recycled. So another important thing we have to look at is how to reduce our waste in the first place. And I think that this in some ways is actually easier because you don't have to worry about all the weird rules for what can be recycled and what can't. You just reduce your waste in the first place. And to do this, all you really need to do is make a few simple swaps to more sustainable alternatives. So for example, you could switch your shampoo and your soap to bar soap and bar shampoo. Or you could switch out your straws and your utensils for something that's reusable instead of something that's disposable. And then there are a ton of other easy things you can do too. So you could switch out your packing and shipping materials to paper and cardboard instead of plastic. And then you can also switch out your coffee filters and your shower curtains and your garbage bag and your school supplies and your makeup and your menstrual products, your household cleaners, all of your toiletries, your holiday decorations. And if at this point you're saying, Emily, this seems impossible, then let me tell you, that's because it is. It is impossible. And the number one sustainability tip I want you to know is that you are not the problem. The problem is not you. The problem is the system that makes it impossible to live sustainably in the first place. So for example, how am I supposed to choose alternatives to driving when I live in Atlanta, which has very limited public transportation and one of the worst pedestrian fatality rates in the country? Or how am I supposed to reduce my plastic waste when everything I need to survive only comes in plastic, including my prescription medications? How are we supposed to do these things? And the answer is that we're not supposed to do them. Our system of turbo capitalism is designed to force us to consume far more than we need, with no regard for the amount of unsustainable waste or the depletion of resources. And you have been trapped in this system for so long that you can't even imagine another way to live, just as the system intended. So let me give you a couple examples of some systems that are working against you that you may not even have noticed. So first off, let's talk about litter. Why are you the one responsible for making sure the plastic bottles that you use don't wind up as litter when Coca-Cola is the one that decided to make that bottle out of plastic in the first place? Or why are you the one responsible for reducing the carbon footprint you create just by existing as an average American human when corporations are the ones that are creating products that force you to have a carbon footprint in the first place? And actually, that second one is not even a rhetorical question. There's a reason for that. And it's that in the early 2000s, the oil giant British Petroleum, or BP, hired a famous PR firm named Ogilvy and Mather to popularize the concept of an individual carbon footprint so they could shift the blame for human-made climate change off of big oil and onto you. I'm not making this up. This is real. You are not the problem here. You know, at the end of the day, none of this matters unless you care about living a more sustainable lifestyle, and lots of people don't. Maybe you don't. Lots of people don't. I like to call those people garbage humans because you just know that they are putting all of their recycling directly into the garbage. Well, garbage humans, even if you don't want to make any changes, you don't have a choice. Your lifestyle is going to change whether you like it or not, because there is not enough earth to support the garbage human lifestyle. At our existing levels of aggregate global consumption, we are already overshooting the Earth's ecological capacity to support human civilization by 60%. In order to stay within that ecological capacity, every human on Earth must limit our consumption of resources to the same level as the average citizen of Guatemala. If you're an average American, you are currently using nearly 4.5 times more than your fair share. And if everyone on Earth consumed the way an average American does, our civilization would require an ecological capacity equivalent to 3.4 Earths. The Earth cannot sustain our current garbage human consumption heavy lifestyle. That is an ecological fact. A reduction in consumption is going to happen no matter what, and it's going to happen one of two ways. First, either we deliberately and drastically reduce our consumption to within the Earth's ecological limits, or we stop consuming entirely when we finally run out of resources to consume. So option one, which is my personal favorite, requires planned and equitable degrowth, organized degrowth through systemic change, not personal lifestyle choices. So you've probably heard of some initiatives here. The Green New Deal is a pretty big one. And if you've heard much about it, you've probably heard a lot of fear mongering about how radical and how expensive it is. But at the end of the day, it's not even enough. And there are a lot of other degrowth initiatives out there that are even more radical. So let's talk about a couple of those, because I will gladly advocate for every single one of them. First off, do not let them exploit your labor by forcing you to contribute to unsustainable production. We need to reimagine our system of American turbo capitalism. We can stall unnecessary economic growth by shortening the work week to 20 hours a week. And we can reduce the size of the workforce by implementing universal basic income. Another one, do not let them manipulate you into believing you must consume more than you actually need. We can destroy the advertising industry. We can regulate deceptive advertising. We can regulate the number of advertising. We can ban advertising for unnecessary and destructive products like plastic water bottles. Third, do not let them tell you that production is the only thing that matters. A huge part of this problem is using gross domestic product, or GDP, as a measurement of growth and progress. That's something we need to eliminate. A lot of people don't realize this, but a single wooden chair contributes the same amount to GDP, regardless of whether it was built with one tree or one entire forest. We need to replace that measurement with a metric that also factors in waste and consumption instead of only production. So for example, the nation of Bhutan has actually already done this and replaced GDP with a metric called gross national happiness instead. And if all of that seems so radical to you that you can only imagine it happening in the wake of a zombie apocalypse that destroys civilization and forces us to start over from scratch, then good, because that means you understand the stakes here. So now let's talk about option two. We do nothing. We keep doing what we're doing, and we degrow by consuming until we consume no more. So what happens if we pick option 2? By 2030, climate change is irreversible. We'll see increased climate disasters, extreme storms, hurricanes, floods, wildfires. People will die. By 2050, our tropical forests will be gone. The stock of seafood in the ocean will be reduced by 90%. Our metal reserves will be exhausted, including gold, copper, silver, zinc, and many of the metals that we need for green energy technology. Our fresh water will be nearly gone, and 1 in 4 people on Earth will live in a country without access to water. People will die. By 2067, we will be out of oil. People will die. This method of degrowth is unplanned, disorganized, and inequitable. It does not affect everyone the same way. Poor nations will suffer first because they can't afford the increasingly high prices for essential resources. Scarce resources will be hoarded by wealthier nations. But then eventually there's not enough left to support the wealthier nations either, and former allies will have to compete for the resources they need to keep their citizens alive. The United States has been at war in the Middle East for 20 years to protect our strategic oil reserves. What do you think our government is going to do when we run out of water? People will die. Do not let them suppress your right to live on this earth without destroying the planet. We have the power to avert a man-made apocalypse through serious systemic change. Keep recycling, keep making sustainable lifestyle choices. Those are all really good habits that will ease this transition that we need to make. But more importantly, advocate for big systemic change fast. Hold our leaders accountable. Hold our corporations accountable. Hold our friends accountable for holding our leaders and our corporations accountable. In the future, you may not have a personal car, but you will have the earth. You may not have an endless supply of cheap consumer goods, but you will have the earth. You may not have a wardrobe full of 1,000 fast fashion items, but you will have the earth. You may not have the newest tech gadgets every year, but you will have the earth. You may not have as much or any meat in your diet, but you will have the earth. In the future, you may not have everything you have right now, but you will have the earth. In the future, we may have a better and more sustainable post-pandemic world. Let it be so.